Cool. So Carly, there's a YouTube link. You can click it and press copy. I'll put it in the chat, but if you want to share it with anyone, that's like the easiest way to have people hop in.
Very fun. Copy, stream, and share it with the
Cool.
world.
All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Bijan. I'm adjunct faculty at PNCA in the graphic design program. I also run a studio called Fisk in Portland, Oregon. Thanks for joining us on the last of our design panel series. We're really excited to have Carly joining us from New York, right? Or no, San Francisco.
New York? I'm in New York. It is
New York.
34.
Got it right. So we're really excited about how this panel, the series has gone over the last semester. Really thankful to everyone who's attended and asked questions. And this was formerly known as lecture series, but we kind of changed it to be a panel series. With COVID, it felt a little bit more intimate and more casual and felt more appropriate for the Zoom lifestyle that we all live in now. So I'm gonna just quickly explain the format, and then I will pass it over to all of the different panelists to introduce themselves. So Carly is going to do a short 10-minute presentation, and then from there we will open it up to questions within this panel that we have, which consists of students and teachers and people. And then we'll leave about 20 minutes to open the conversation up to the general public, and you can submit a question via text through the Q&A panel, or you can raise your hand and we'll promote you so we can see your face and you can ask Carly directly. Cool, that's all I got. I will pass it over to the students. We can start with Emily.
Yeah, hi, I'm Emily. I'm a postbac student here at PNCA. I'm actually at PNCA right now, and I have my mask near me, but I'm maybe breaking rules. I shouldn't say that on live Zoom. But yeah, I'm happy to be here with you guys.
I'll jump in next. My name's Emery, and I'm also a postbac student in the design department. I apologize for the mask because I'm actually at work. I'm at an office, so they would be angry if I took it off. But anyway, I too am also super excited to talk to you a little bit more and hear about what you have to say about your work.
And I'm Alicia. I'm a junior graphic design student at PNCA. I am not at work. I'm at my apartment building, so I'm not breaking any rules.
As far as we know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give some thanks. First of all, hi, I'm Kristen Rogers Brown. I know a lot of the people that I'm seeing in the call, but not everyone. So if we haven't talked before, or you haven't been to a lecture before, I'm the department head in graphic design at PNCA. I'm also an art director, creative director. I used to work with Bitch Magazine, Bitch Media for many years before I was here. But before I was a designer, I was a writer. And so that makes me very excited to talk with Carly, who sort of comes between all those fields and is merging all kinds of creativity and, sort of purpose-driven work in your interaction work too. Little quick intro, but I know your work will help introduce you even more. I do want to give a special thanks for the whole year of help from our tech folks, including Weston, who is running this today. Thank you for solving many problems, including today's little last minute hiccup. There's always something new, and we appreciate you so much. To Chelsea Stephen, who is our partner in crime and our department assistant. She's just a great solver of all problems, but also has been really fun to brainstorm with about the series and other stuff this year to build community. And to all of our students who have been attending regularly, even when you're on Zoom a lot, and seems like you actually like doing it because you're participating a lot. So that is really fun and gratifying. And it's been personally just really awesome to have you all behind us and see the great work you're doing. This is about you. So I hope that, if I don't have to ask any questions, even though I'm super curious, that's a great thing. But On to Carly. Carly is a writer and digital innovator. She uses language and interaction to engage people in new and interesting ways. The thing that I love about your work, Carly, is that you manage to be sometimes super earnest and like passionate and like honest about what you're trying to do, motivated by work that makes a difference. But you also strike me as very practical and funny and are actually like able to bring like some liveliness even to like the casual bystander to your work. I think that making that look fluid and easy is a real superpower, because it is not easy to make it look easy. But I'm really excited about the sort of tongue-in-cheek projects that you have that also kind of poke at people and motivate them to do things differently. I loved talking to you as over email as part of our interview series, which I'll post a link to after the talk. But we're just really excited to hear more from you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me and for that lovely intro. I think it's really fun to hear how other people introduce yourself. I think it'd be really fun to have like a collection of that and, you know, hear it back to yourself. One for like a little confidence boost, but also just like, you know, you do all these things and then it's funny to look back on them and see kind of how they connect, which I will share with you all today. So I guess without further ado, let me share my screen. Excellent. I think that is the one. Gosh, is it possible to start a talk without saying, can you see my slides in the year of our internet, 2021? I'm going to assume you can see this, but hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, and to all of you for your presence and attention during, as Chris was saying, has been a year with an extensive amount of screen time. So I know I am competing for your attention along with all the other devices and screens in the world. So I am very grateful for all of you for logging on and spending some time here today. As mentioned, I am indeed Carly Ayres. This is my current website. It's an open editable Google Doc I made back in 2015. So for most of my career, I've worked as a writer, as introduced, using language and interaction to engage various people in new and interesting ways. And as such, I would say this site is somewhat emblematic of that, in that as a Google Doc, it's the place where most of my work starts. It is also where I currently work at Google, but for the record, I did have this site before I worked at Google, if that counts for anything. And it's also a space for others to engage and participate in that process, which is a theme in a lot of the work that I did. So aside from being a place where I might add recent projects or out of office notices, anyone, and I mean anyone, can also add a few suggestions or edits. So it's seen quite a few iterations since 2015, earning it the wonderful title of one of the 10 ugliest websites on the internet. A big, deep thank you to Fast Company for that one. And right now it looks like this, because frankly, no one needs to be looking at my website right now. There's plenty of other things they could be focusing on. And it has some links and some other stuff to that note. And I currently work at Google. I've been there for a little over a year and a half now, working on the UX Community and Culture team, which is a group of people creating programs and resources for the designers, developers, researchers, and writers who shape user experience across Google products. And a lot of my work involves this website. It's called Google Design, where we tell stories about the people, product, and practice of UX at Google. And in practice, that might look like this: a story on managing ambiguity as a design manager, or a celebratory roundup of a lot of the work that people were able to put out into the world during a year where that felt like a Herculean effort to try to celebrate and create space for some of the fun stuff too, from Google Arts and Culture projects to tech experiments and AR filters and book islands. Or it might be a personal story from a manager. This one happens to be from my manager, Margaret Lee, on the intersection of identity and leadership and the friction that often exists between the two. Or perhaps it's just an excuse to ask a bunch of people what they consider to be good design, which we don't have time to unpack today, but is a statement that definitely carries a lot of weight and a lot of historical context. But also just working with some friends to create really fun illustrations that depict all the items that a few folks consider to be good design. We also run various programs and events. SPAN is Google's annual conference on design and technology. It takes place in a different city every year, but in 2019, which is the last time we hosted it, it was in Brooklyn. And I had a lot of fun curating a program of speakers around the theme of structures, systems, and our agency within them. These are some photos from the design led by our then design lead, Damon Carell, and designer Alessandro Bautista. This is me in a little green jumpsuit. We also do an annual reader that accompanies the event. It's basically like a written journal full of like art articles, all on that topic of systems and structures and agency, edited together into one print-bound artifact. This is everyone in green jumpsuits. That was kind of neat. And in some ways, this work feels like a very natural continuation of the work that I've always been doing, also around connecting communities and amplifying knowledge. Several years ago, I started a Slack group for designers and creative people to come together called Hundreds Under 100, a play on any number of awards given to a select few under a certain age, usually 30. Hundreds Under 100 was meant to be an antithesis, inclusive and inviting. Everyone was welcome. It was intended to be this community space for folks to share work, get advice, providing an alternative to, say, tweeting about how much I should charge a potential client who is likely already following me on Twitter. Just a space where I could really ask those questions, and other people could also learn from them and hopefully share some knowledge along the way. So started as a Slack group because that was the very cool new enterprise software of the moment, with just a few channels, intros, help, jobs, show and tell, link pack. Now there's hundreds. And in the before times, we also hosted a series called Show and Tell, which was a live manifestation of that channel. So an opportunity for people across a range of disciplines, from designers to developers, people outside of tech, people working at nonprofits, just kind of all over the map, come together and share that work in an informal setting, usually in 6 minutes or less. Really quite a range of talks, but this is always fun because a lot of these folks have never given a talk before, and it's fun to have a space to bounce around ideas and to share them with others. I also ran a small design studio with some other humans for a few years, where a big part of our practice was sharing what we learned along the way in hopes of making it a bit easier for someone else just starting out. So we launched our studio with a 26-hour live stream where we made something every hour for 26 hours, one for each letter of the alphabet, live streaming it so anyone anywhere could follow along and see what we made, in hopes of demystifying the not so glamorous inner workings of a small design studio. Very not glamorous in that over those 26 hours, we made a lot of stuff, a lot of arguably very useless stuff. It's really hard to make anything incredibly useful in an hour, but not impossible. We designed a house. We created a dink bar, which was kind of a kind bar, and a music video. We also shared this flowchart of our decision-making process for what types of projects we should take on, including a section where we ask ourselves, are we broke? Yes, no. Okay, like really, really broke? Is this like, do we absolutely need to do this project? And if so, are we going to feel okay and be willing to talk about this? Because if the answer to that was no, we wouldn't do it. It was kind of that simple. We believe that if we couldn't afford to keep our doors open without doing work that we weren't willing and excited to talk openly about, then maybe we shouldn't be running a design studio. We also made this guide from the Creative Independent to working with clients. It includes everything about our client intake process, which if you're thinking about starting a small studio, definitely recommend looking it up. Even as a freelancer, it has a lot of like email templates and advice for that kind of stuff. We shared our profit and loss statement at industry conferences. This one was at Core 77, where there were a lot of other studio founders and just kind of talking about what that looks like. What does a profit and loss statement look like? And how much do you actually make on some of these projects? And true to form, as part of our announcement that we were shutting down the studio, we also shared a link to a Google Drive folder with various templates, tools, and other things that we created for the course of running the studio, in hopes that it could be helpful to someone else, perhaps starting a studio of their own. For all that, I was the second employee at Creative Mornings, which you may be familiar with. I do believe they have a very thriving Portland chapter. It's a breakfast lecture series for the creative community, involving donuts a lot of the time, in several cities all over the world. And so again, while connecting the dots from a role to Creative Mornings to working on UX community culture at Google, along with a few other projects along the way, it may seem like a pretty straight shot. In reality, it feels a lot more like this. I think, like we were talking at the beginning, looking back makes a lot of sense. And trying to make sense of it all, sometimes what I'll do is I'll create my own boundaries around that chaotic, noodly mess. That with the right critical thinking and reflection, you can start to define what exactly those boundaries look like. And for me, those boundaries really come to a set of values, some principles that I use to check in with myself and ensure that I'm growing and evolving in all the ways that I want to, so that when I look back at that noodly mess, I can start to see all the places where maybe I went beyond those boundaries. Those values set the boundaries of my creative practice. So anything outside of it is where I quickly spiral into feeling unappreciated, undercompensated, angry, sad, generally out of sync with the universe. And my practice is always an exercise in moving those boundaries a little here, a little there, with each experience to get closer to the stuff that I can be excited about and want to be doing. What are your principles? Presuming we have comment capabilities, I would love to know. I always love seeing kind of how people define the boundaries of their own creative practice. For me, everything being relationships is super core to a lot of my work. A lot of my work is about people, connecting them, bringing them together, sharing those resources and knowledge. That's been a little more difficult these days. So I've been spending a lot of time online, doing those over video calls. I've been doing them pretty much every day since work from home started back in March, having a lot of conversations with people off the internet, which has been a lot of fun. And I try to take notes as well to make sure that everything doesn't immediately seep out of my currently very porous brain. You can find them on Arena in case you're looking for a few new inputs as well. And with that, enough about me. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and chat with all of you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Do Emily, Alicia, or Emery want to ask the first question?
I'm happy to go ahead. I have a question for you. So that was an amazing presentation. First off, that was really cool just to see, well, as a, kind of a budding designer, I guess, that it's okay to feel like your trajectory is kind of like that, because that's kind of, I'm in the midst of that kind of like wormy mess. I don't remember exactly how you put it, but that's how it feels. But then also during your presentation, it seemed like a lot of the work that you were doing has, you hold it very dear to you and your morals, and it sounds like all the work that you were doing is very much in tune with the connecting communities thing. But also during the Friday at Fives, you said something super interesting. I thought you said that it's important to not conflate your purpose with your job. And it seems like in a lot of cases, you are very passionate about your job anyway. So I was hoping that you could like dive into that a little bit more, elaborate on like what you mean by believing that your work doesn't need to be meaningful, because it seems like it really is meaningful to you.
Sometimes. I feel like I show the more meaningful stuff for some of these videos. I would say there's definitely a little bits of chunks of of stuff. And I would say that's the cone shape that I drew there. Like it's definitely been a narrowing down. I think the further I've gone and the longer I've been doing this work, the longer that I show the work that I'm excited about, the more I get those types of projects. In the beginning, there's definitely way less of that. And it's just kind of this like constant editing of like, okay, these are the things I want to do more of. These are the opportunities I want to go towards. So I think there's been, definitely like an active curation of that type of work as well. And I mean, there's, for even, especially working at Google now, I mean, I was surprised you didn't go that direction, because I think that would have been a heavy hitting question, is like, you say morals are really important, but you work at a large technology company, like break that down for me. But I think a lot of it is identity. And I think when I check in with myself, it's like the times where I'm like really I'm unhappy or unmotivated or I'm not excited about my work, it's usually because one of those things is missing. And so for me, it comes down to like that list is a really good, just like gut check for myself. If I find myself like not getting the like enough like people inputs, it's like, how can I be meeting more people? How can I be having more meaningful conversations? How can I be connecting beyond myself? How can I ensure that I'm getting like a diversity of inputs and not kind of just like melting into myself? But I do believe that, yeah, your job shouldn't have to be your identity. I think that was something that was incredibly difficult for me when we shut down RF, was I was like, if I am not the founder of a small design studio based in New York, who am I? And that was really difficult. And I think working at a place like Google, where it is so big, you know, there's just so many people there, and I certainly don't want that to be my identity either. So I think figuring out how to do the work that I'm excited about, whether within making it my job, I think is part of it, but also being satisfied if maybe all my work doesn't ladder up to that, and then I can have other projects, other ways that I'm being true to those values outside of my 9 to 5 or however I choose to spend that time. So kind of a mixed bag of an answer there. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough, and I don't think I figured it out yet. I think if I have another graph that I drew where it's like, I'm like, it's an asymptote, and that it's like you are actually like this is the 2-dimensional view, but you like if you turn it sideways, it's actually 3 dimensions, and you're spiraling around, and you actually never quite find what that little nexus is at the end. It's just this totally unattainable goal. But I think it is very dangerous to entwine your passions with your identity and how you make money. It's a dangerous game. And I think in design, we all have kind of one toe in that pool anyways, and figuring out how to also create your identity and your principles outside of your job is very important, because you can lose your job tomorrow, you know.
I have a question. I don't know you, Carly, but it seems like you're like a fun person and funny. And I'm just like curious, like, and I think it was visible in your presentation and just general like vibe. I'm just curious how you approach like sense of humor and humor in your work. And that's the first question. The second question is like, when do you use it and when do you not use it?
Yeah, no, good question. I probably use it too much, I think is the general feedback that I usually receive. You know, humor is a crutch in a lot of ways. I think it's usually ingrained in it. It's a result of a few different things. I think especially in the past year, I've had, I think whenever I'm writing it depends on the message, right? You know, when is humor appropriate? I think I've written about like 1,000 brand voice and tone style guidelines where it's like the last rule is like, you can be funny, but not too funny. Try to decide when it's okay to be funny, because sometimes it's not. I remember I worked on it was like a gynecological health app. And like, it was meant to be, it had a very like quirky brand voice, very like fun and playful. But like, you know, sometimes you're delivering some like really difficult information and it's people's health and it's like very personal. And so walking that line between like trust and quirky, you know, it kind of, the tone we settled on was like that of like an aunt, like kind of the fun aunt who like you can trust. You call them to pick you up from a party. They will always give it to you straight, but there's a little bit of like fun there. I think I think it usually depends on like the level of trust that is built there for sure. Is it something that exists? Is this a first time person like encountering this out in the wild? Can you ensure where they'll be encountering that message or the product or whatever the thing you're designing? Like, do you actually know what the environment will be? I think especially this year, thinking of like, I mean, all the ways that we are on Zoom and, you know, on screen, off screen, we're in people's homes, just like heightened sensitivity or like everyone is experiencing this time so radically different. Having sensitivity, trying to think of like, what is the absolute worst case scenario where this will not land well? And then kind of practicing restraint there.
So it's like contextual.
Yes.
Based on the moment, but yeah. I mean, I always enjoy, like, I think personally when people on Zoom calls like bring a sense of energy, because I think it is like, it's hard for me personally to always like be energetic on Zoom calls. So I really appreciate the kind of like liveliness. It feels like, I don't know, it's like a refreshing treat in the day amongst all these other Zoom calls, you know, so yeah.
I mean, there's a difference between energy and humor though, too. I feel like I have a responsibility. I mean, you teach, I teach, like, and the rest of you show up to class and probably also teach or teach in some sort of other capacity of your lives. Like, I feel a responsibility to the other people where I'm like, I have to bring it. I might have like garbage. I mean, there's a period where I was moving, which you all experienced, whereas like everything out of frame is trash and everything is chaos. And like, I must just like focus in and just bring you everything I have. And you know, that I owe you that. Some days I can't do it, you know, I owe you my best, but some days I don't always have it. But I try. It helps so, you know, you just put the chaos kind of behind a door.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, I also really appreciate that, your honesty, like in those things. It's really hard to figure out when to be vulnerable, I think, about that stuff, and when it actually can put people in a place where it's making them uncomfortable if you're too vulnerable, or you're kind of giving away too much. I'm curious, when you're kind of focusing on that being present and how you tune the rest out, does that center you too? Do you struggle with it?
Absolutely. I mean, does it center me? No, not always. No, it doesn't. And that's always a negotiation too. You're like, I think about that a lot with like work. I'm like, how much of myself do I want to bring to this every day? Like, I mean, so yeah, today I teach on Wednesday. So tonight I'll be on Zoom for another like 3 hours later this evening. And it's like, okay, like how much can I give here? Can I give there? And how much do I save for myself? How much do I save for like, you know, my family, the other people who have to deal with me once I shut this computer screen? Because you gotta save something, otherwise the whole life will fall in disarray. But yeah, no, I don't know what the answer to that is. I think that's the same question of like, it's like work-life balance has become like ever present. And it was always a question, you know, people are like, how much of myself do I put in my work? How much do I put here? But no one's quite figured. I don't know anyone who's figured that out. I think some people are very good at setting boundaries. I have a very rigorous calendar. And I have like I like use a lot of tools for like blocking time and like, and that, but it, and, you know, it's kind of, I use structure to kind of create those boundaries for myself, which, you know, doesn't allow for a lot of spontaneity. Fun time. But yeah, it's a balance.
Alicia, Emily, feel free to jump in anytime.
Yeah, I guess, so I have a writing background as well. And I'm kind of curious as to like, what came first for you, writing or design, and how have you like used the other to inform the other? And yeah, I guess just like a little bit of your background there would be interesting to hear about. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have a BFA in industrial design. So my background is like physical product design, welding, woodworking. Haven't really touched that since. But my background is technically design, but I spent a lot more time talking, if that's not something that's clear that I do a lot of, and writing. And I think my most on brand Carly Ayres story is I would make press releases for my classmates. to get them on design blogs. This is like, I mean, I graduated 2013. So it was like Design Milk and like Coraflot or there are like all these like, I don't know, there were like all these like sites and it was like very exciting to like try to get our work on these sites, especially as students, because I mean, no one was coming and stopping by our classroom in Providence and like checking out our work. So that was like, that's kind of like how I dipped my toe into that. And then I started writing for like Core 77 industrial design blog. And when I moved to New York, that was super fun because it became like this total way to like go to like openings and parties and say that I was there to cover it as like a press journalist and like meet a bunch of people in the process. So that was kind of my foray. I actually do not have much traditional writing education, I would say. I think that's something that I'm like catching up on now, like taking like classes in that and making sure I know the difference between a semicolon and whatever other punctuation exists in the alphabet. But yeah, I ended up, I think that led to, writing for different editorial publications about design, and then doing a lot of like brand voice and tone work. Did some chatbot personalities, and that was kind of how I wedged my way into Google. But yeah, that's been the journey. And at Google, I'm technically a UX content strategist. I think there's probably like a future world where like I recently learned the term content designer, where that might be where I more squarely sit. But I think that's also why I've always leaned into like the principles over like titles, because I've never really, I want to be one of those people that's just like, this is like my thing and I'm very specifically good at this one thing. But I've always been a bit of a generalist in that way. How about you?
That was great. Thank you.
Carly, was that a question for Emily?
Yeah, Emily, tell me about how you got into writing.
Oh, sorry. It flipped out for a minute there. Well, I chose to do writing because it was something I just really enjoyed. And I've always liked how like language, both visually and written, can just allow us to connect and grow with one another. And I think those communities are so important. So yeah, I have a bachelor's of arts, BA in English. But then I also minored in graphic design and decided to come back to school this year during the pandemic. Crazy time to go back to school, but it's been really rad, and it's wrapping up here in a couple weeks. And it's fascinating to be able to do both writing and design together. And I think it really helps inform my practice. I think I definitely still have like ways to grow with my writing, even with a formal background. Like there's so much to learn, but it's helpful, and it's fun to be able to be playful with both. And I admire somebody who is like fun and playful with their work like that. I'm trying not to be too serious all the time. So yeah.
Do you think all designers should write?
Yeah, hands down, at least at some point. Like, I think you have to be good at talking about your own work too. And maybe that falls into talking and presenting, but I think being able to articulate your thoughts on what you are designing and what you have designed, or where you're going with your design, is so important in the workplace, in communicating to people who aren't designers, and just growing in that community. So I would say yes.
Yeah, I used to find a lot of solace in the fact that at a lot of places it's just called communication design, you know? And it's like, all right, you gotta be a good communicator. That's kind of the goal, right? That's what we're trying to like tell people something, usually, to get them somewhere.
It's kind of funny. I have a background in communication studies. That's what I got my bachelor's in. And it's kind of, in a lot of ways, people kind of like scoff at it because it's like, what are you going to do with that degree or whatever? But in other ways, it's also like what can't you do with that? You know, there's so many, especially like you said, Emily, like trying to connect people with your designs that don't really understand the visual language as well, like can't like have more of an ability to connect if if you are able to articulate where you're coming from, why you're designing what you are, why you're influenced by what you are. And so I think that that's totally spot on, that like communications as a whole is it's sort of like an avenue for connecting communities, which it sounds like is what all of your work is about, Carly.
Yeah, for sure. What kind of stuff are you working on these days?
Well, I am also finishing up this week, but I have recently found a love for typography, which is kind of funny because it's like the visualization of the communications, which is kind of fun because I've never done type design, or I hadn't really had any sort of background in typography or type design. So PNCA has kind of opened up that door, which is really exciting me right now. Because I also love writing, and like Emily, that was sort of my avenue towards. I did like the very fine art side of things, and then I did communications, and it felt like design sort of a beautiful nexus of both of those. So right now, typography is really exciting me. So we'll see where that goes.
It all connects, right? Yeah, I feel like all this stuff. I mean, I remember graduating, and someone looked at my portfolio and was like, I had taken like classes, and I had taken so many classes outside of my department that I almost didn't graduate. Like I was like taking like classes in like landscape architecture, and I took some graphic design classes, and I just wanted to learn all sorts of different things. And there's so many intersections between all of this stuff, but I think writing is such a good tool. It's a tool like anything else.
How did you?
So many writers in here. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that everybody's a writer in this room. Like, I suck at writing. Do you guys have any advice for me? Like, words are just not my thing. Besides, I guess, practicing, which is like, of course.
My advice is try to say everything in the least number of words, which is not something that I do when I'm speaking, and probably some, but like I always think that that's like the best place to start. Or even when I'm like editing, when I look at when I'm like editing someone else, I like look at it, I'm like, how to use the least number of words. You can always add words later. I feel like it's very counterintuitive to probably how like traditionally in like high school, they teach you to write and you're trying to hit a word count and all this stuff. And you start adding all these like flourishes and stuff. And it's like, how can I communicate the most information with the least amount of words? But everyone can write.
I'd also bounce off of that and say that like I don't think it matters too much if you use like really fancy words or like really high language. Like you want people to understand what you're saying, so don't worry so much about sounding smart. Like sound like you are a human and communicate at that the best. Like communicate with your pals or whoever your audience is, like through your, I guess, like I don't want to call it lowbrow nature, but through your humanity.
I'm also really like, I feel like I talk with my hands and like a lot of body language, and it's been hard with like Zoom doing that completely. So that's like another.
Same. Yeah,
Hard
totally.
Hard sim. Like always like knocking stuff over.
Yeah, or like wait,
yeah.
and like in the frame, like, or what I'm like trying to explain. Like I explain down here, my hands are like moving. I'm like, wait, I gotta talk up here. You know, like.
It's amazing. I've been learning American Sign Language since like last March, and it's like a spatial language, and Zoom is just, does not do it justice. It is impossible. I'm always like trying to make sure that I am taking up the right amount of space so I can communicate things clearly, but you're setting things up physically around yourself. And that's a real challenge of digital software like this.
Yeah.
Was that a COVID endeavor that you started learning, or was that due to some other inspiration?
I started pre-COVID.
Okay.
It was actually that SPAN conference I mentioned. We had artist Christine Sun Kim came, who's deaf, and with that, like a few friends in design came and attended who are also deaf. And I was watching them use sign with each other. They were signing with each other, and I just thought it was really beautiful and cool and interesting, and wanted to learn more. So I started. Google had classes. but they were canceled. And so then I found like an online teacher and I started taking classes at like a university. Now I'm in it. I'm deep. Happens to the best of us. But another note on short writing is just accessibility, just making you want the most people to understand what you're saying.
That's what I was gonna say. I feel like I know a lot of people that have started learning sign language, and I think there's just been like more of an awareness brought to like communicating with everyone, or like just as many people as possible.
Just the grammar makes me think different about how I write, like just how sentences are structured. I grew up only speaking English, and so I really have a limited different language experience and awareness, like some Spanish, but to start thinking differently about how I write just based on how different sentences are structured, or how you set something up spatially, you really are like describing it. So like, how can I describe things in my writing as well in a way that's a little bit more illustrative, using fewer words? Any COVID pastimes here?
What was that?
I was just gonna insert a really quick note, just that if anyone in the general audience has questions, you can start submitting them to the Q&A panel. We have about 15 minutes left.
Oh my gosh, Marley's here. Hi, Marley. Wonderful. Good to see a familiar username.
My COVID pastime has been walking. Just like walking everywhere. I feel like we take, or I don't know, I grew up in a city that I drive all the time. So like being able to just walk everywhere and like see how close things are, or experiencing that, it brings a lot of clarity, and it's nice. And Portland's been really beautiful lately. It's been very good weather, and trees and stuff, flowers.
It's currently pouring in New York. Well, it's lightening up, but it's a little dreary here. We're in what they call full spring, where you think it's springtime, and then it gets you. It's a little chilly out, but I do like walking.
All right,
I'm
we have a
walking
question.
like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, I
everyone.
was just filling space. Let's have questions.
No, sorry, I'm just
Questions
like,
are better.
it's just all technical stuff that I feel like that's my role here. We have a question from Jason, who's a student at PNCA, and Jason's question for Carly is, what are the components to successful writing?
Ooh, gosh, I'm definitely not the expert at that, I have to say. There's probably people on this call. Emily, what are the components of successful writing?
Don't call me out like that. Oh no. This answer. I need a minute to stew on this.
All right, stew on it. Does anyone else know?
Well, I feel like you started well, like concise. That's a good pillar, right?
Know your audience, I think is always a good approach. Who are you talking to? What are you trying to say? I feel like, the way I approach writing is like, how do I approach a conversation? Like if I'm talking to someone, like no one wants you to just blah, 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 like talking at them. You want to like, think about who your audience is, what's the goal and what you're trying to say, what's ideally their goal, what's kind of the intersection of those two goals, and writing to that, I think is always a good approach. Fewer words, get to the stuff at the top. I feel like there's a lot of times where we were all taught to, maybe have like a long introduction. It's like people don't have time. People don't want to read a bunch of stuff. You just, but for different purposes, maybe they don't. But a lot of my writing is like, how can I say exactly what I need to say and not lose someone's attention as quickly as possible?
I think also you have to like get out all of the like just crap that's in your head first. So write everything out first, and then probably trash that. Like you have to make mistakes with it. You have to write kind of just whatever comes to mind first and kind of flush it out first, and then maybe take a deeper dive and edit and have people read it. And I think community is important. Having people read it, reading it out loud. I don't know if this is the key to successful writing, but these are at least important components to it.
Totally. Yeah. If I had to repeat that, I'd say, yeah, the key to good writing is having a really good editor. At least that's what served me very well in all my writing. It's like when I can have someone else who reads it, gives me feedback. Feedback is a gift. That makes such a good difference. I totally agree.
I feel like you guys, I'll just jump in really quick. I think you guys are really, everything you're saying is about respect for your audience, like respect for each other's time, a little empathy for that. And like, that can come through writing. That's also in your visual communications too. So if you're not a good writer, it's kind of like using the skills that you're good at to make up for that. And also knowing that everybody's trying to communicate with each other. So like, what is good writing? You know, I mean, we're trying to talk about that, but I don't think any of us have a prescription.
Fortunately, I'm sure there's some good listicles out there, but yeah, respect for your audience and get feedback, iterate, you know, share it with people and improve on it, you know, be quick to improve things that maybe need improvement. And do it the better you get.
Sorry. And someone asked a follow-up about, on the other hand, like what's the component for successful design, or what are the components?
Alicia, what's the component for successful design?
I feel like it could be similar to all the writing components, like getting feedback, iteration, know your audience. But the concise part, I don't know about. Like, sometimes it's better to, well, maybe.
I think that could, I mean, it could feed into just iterating and figuring out the most concise, direct way to convey your message, you know, and you probably can't do that until you've done a lot of iterations. And I think that also kind of goes back to something that you sort of touched on, Emily, just like the idea of you can't really write and edit at the same time. You have to like write it all and then edit it later, because otherwise you just kind of stunt your writing process. I feel like I also feel that with design, where if I'm in the back of my head going like, oh, this is terrible, this is not going to look good, that's wrong, this is wrong, like I'm not going to get anywhere with the project. I have to just kind of make a whole bunch of crap and then kind of go from there, and then start parsing out what's working, what's not later.
Yeah, making leads to more making. I mean, it's definitely, sometimes you could just write pages, and what isn't that like Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, you know, wake up every day, write like several pages, stick them in an envelope.
Yeah,
I don't do it, but I hear it works wonders for people.
I started doing that in the middle of I think earlier this semester, and I was like, wow, I'm really bad at this. So I'm gonna, start over, give myself some grace, but
Wait, what do you do? What is it exactly?
Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, one of her methods is to write out 2 pages of every day, just anything, just have to fill up 2 pages. I think the same kind of applies to design. Like, give yourself that time to write, quote unquote, design 2 pages or something.
Yeah.
We have a couple more questions in the Q&A. I can read them out really quick. We have one from Sky. How important is provocation and subversion in your work? And what advice do you have on exploring that space for students?
Gosh, explore it. This is like one of those rare moments in your life where you get to, just totally try everything. Throw it against the wall, see what sticks. I would say in my work, how important is it? It's a good question. I mean, I like to make work that makes people think. And usually I think that is a provocation. I like to make work that is interactive, that engages people, makes them want to say or do something back. And I guess that is a provocation in a certain way, subverting expectations. I think it's one of those things where if you're, every time you're doing it, maybe it's not always as effective in the same way that you can't. Yeah, it feels like it's probably difficult to sustain and maintain. Everything can't be a provocation, but I think when used in an appropriate context, it's, yeah, I really do like to do work that makes people think about things differently. And as a student, I would say, so what advice do you have on exploring that space for students? I mean, do it. Yeah, think of questions you have. Think of ways you see the world, or you might want to see the world differently, or ways you can change context and environments to frame other people's experiences and make them think about the world differently. But now is really the time to, be creating that type of work. I think it sounds kind of sad, but it gets harder, I think, to kind of find the appropriate ways to do that. Especially like if you're doing client work or working at a company to find those provocations. But I think we should always be trying to create work that makes people ask questions. So finding the right spaces to do that is important. Anyone else have thoughts on that? That's the question. Yeah, go.
Well, I have a separate question that I kind of want to just quickly ask before I lose opportunity. We have 5 minutes, by the way. I'm also a timekeeper, by the way. I love doing it for some reason. It's really fun. My question is, and I don't know if this is somewhere on the internet already, but I was curious, like, at what moment did everyone at RF? It's supposed to be hard to pronounce, maybe. I don't know. I was wondering, like, if at what point the idea came about to make everything public. It seems very in line with the project, just from the way you started your studio. It kind of is like a nice bookend, actually. Like, it makes a lot of sense. But I was just curious if it was like, was it like a aha moment, or was it like something that you were thinking about consciously, I guess?
I think it was something, I mean, it was the intention of the studio. Yeah, I mean, we started the studio to learn, and part of that was sharing what we learned along the way. And so it was definitely like something that had bounced around. It was like, how can we like invite people in? And like, can we live stream our meetings? Can we like do this here? And pretty quickly, I think we hit the wall of understanding why so many other people don't do that. It's like, your client doesn't want you to, you have no idea what you're doing, it can be confusing, you know, you're kind of like, privacy concerns. It's really hard to come up with good ideas sometimes when you're live streaming everything you do. It becomes performative. You want to have some authenticity. So I think we always kind of had ambitions to run like an open studio. Like there's that Studio August that does it. There's a few others out there that I have like a collection of them on Arena too, of like people who figured that out. And we never really could, just logistically. And then, but once we made the decision that we were shutting down the studio, like Andrew just said, Andrew started a new studio called School that's out there that he runs with Nikki. And once it was decided that like, okay, RF is coming to a close, we were wrapping up client projects. I also tended to work more on the front end of projects. I did a lot of like the new business stuff, the operations stuff, writing and assets and that kind of stuff. And so as we were wrapping stuff up, they were like more entrenched in some of the design development. And it was kind of like, I was like, all right, well, I'm like cleaning up a lot of our documents, wrapping, like tying up loose ends. Might as well scrub a folder and kind of actually make this happen. Because if we're shutting it down, then hopefully that means no one can sue us. Although I don't know if that's technically true. There were our lawyers were not super psyched about that project, but the studio doesn't exist. So, but yeah, that was kind of how it came about. It was something that we had always talked about and kind of, took ending the studio to have enough time to actually sit down and do it.
Thank you.
I think we got one more question in the Q&A from the lovely Marley Culver. And Marley says, hi, Hondo Queen. What from your childhood or upbringing do you think has contributed to where you are now in your work or your general being? Anything specific inspire you to try to get to where you are, or anything totally unrelated? And
I guess in 2 minutes, I would say need for structure and control has probably led to me creating a lot of assets and folder structures and organizing of resources. And I'm very at home in spreadsheets, and I feel like I've always sought out the community. I mean, I remember transferring schools in high school, and I remember the experience of being like, who are my friends going to be? Who am I going to be? How do you like meet people and do all that stuff? So I'm sure there are some formative moments. I would say, yeah, the want for control is probably one that that underpins a lot of things in certain ways. But yeah, I'm from Florida, so I don't know if that has any relation to anything else. But I don't wear a lot of open-toed shoes anymore.
This all feels very relatable, except for the Florida part.
This is one continuous thought. This is wear sunscreen, you know.
That feels relatable.
If I could give you one piece of advice, being a good designer and a good writer, it's wear sunscreen.
Any last? Yeah, you really did bring some water. Stay hydrated. Another piece of good advice.
I'm trying. You know, the water in this building isn't top notch, I have to say.
We don't relate to that in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky out here.
The water's the best here.
Does anybody have one last question?
Final thoughts. Any final words of advice, inspiration, hopes, and dreams from my fellow panelists? How should we go out into the world after this?
That's a really good question. How should we go out into the world after this? I'm wondering, like, I feel like we've all been having little individual discussions about that here. And that relates to how you design and work in the world too, but also just life. How are you guys starting that journey, if you are, or are you not?
There's a question how to go out into the world after this.
Yeah, I like that question.
I mean, one step at a time and just hoping for the best. Trying to be an optimist here. We're in finals, so obviously that's my answer.
I'm impressed anyone got on this call during finals. I feel like that's rubber hits the road. Very busy.
We all need productive procrastination, right? I think that's a good thing.
I think my would be just to keep talking to people. I think like this is obviously that, but I think also like I weirdly started talking to my friends more during the pandemic. Like we were doing Zooms and we had never done that before. And I think regardless of what happens, like maintaining that kind of communication is something that I'm looking forward to doing.
For me, I think save a little for yourself. Like be fiercely protective where you need to be, because you're going to be countering that with whatever risks make you uncomfortable, which is also a good thing. But that's what I'm trying to figure out. I guess that's a lifelong thing, right? It's not going to be just now.
It's hard, but I think it's good. I like the aspiration. I think we all need it. I think there's times where kind of like with those boundaries, you'll go beyond it, you'll immediately feel it, and then you'll come back in and redefine those lines. But
yeah,
it's like driving a car or riding a bike. It's kind of like, it has to keep going in some direction. So it's just about navigating.
Kind of channeling that chaos of the extra speed and everything. Yeah. How about the rest of you guys?
I like something that you said, my first question, the idea of just like getting excited about what you're doing and then just doing a lot of what you're excited about will lead you to more projects that excite you. I think that that's kind of something that I'm hoping to really lean into because, there's no time to do stuff that's really unexciting. It's not.
You get the work you do. That's like super. People look at the book, they see it, they're like, I want that one. And you're like, and that was the hard thing in the studio too, is trying to get people to convincing people to let you do something you haven't done before is always really hard. There's like another talk somewhere there about that. But
Well, I think we're at the end of our time here.
I want to hear how it's going to go out into the world, though.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
How are you going to go out into the world after this?
To everyone else, or wait, was that?
Last but not least, Alicia, I thought might have a good answer.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I have a good answer, but I feel like I took from this, I'm going to go out respectfully and just like a human. I'm not going to be afraid of like chaos. I'm like, that's okay. I'm going to survive is basically how I'm going to go out.
I'm going to survive. I appreciate that. Sorry, Kristen.
No, that's a really good answer. I'm never sure when to let somebody off the hook from talking or be like, let's really make you talk. That's a good thing. I think that was the right call. Yeah, totally. All right. I want to thank everybody so much again for being here. All you guys who are on the panel for bringing it. Bijan also for being such an awesome partner and co-host this year and leader, and Carly for all your willingness to jump in and answer all our weird, great questions and ask good ones. It's been really fun. And I hope everybody who's on the call in the chat, I hope you'll stay in touch. We'll do some form of the design lecture series in the fall, maybe panels still. This has been actually something that I think would be really fun to maintain, because the opportunity to connect with folks like you, Carly, you know, in the middle of your day just for an hour, and it feels really refreshing. It feels like the world's really big, and I think that's important right now and always. So
yeah, thank you, Carly. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for everyone who's also been joining from all over the world too. It's been really cool to have like a big network, so thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It's really fun.
All right, enjoy your Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
see you later.